So sometimes we think it's easier to run away from our problems rather than face it and deal with it head on. And this is one thing that happens a lot in driving tests, where I've seen many learners running from one test center to another test center just to avoid certain situations. But remember, this is not always the way out, because sometimes you might try and run away from Clifton's roundabout, for example, in Heathrow Green in London, or you're trying to run away from the College Road roundabout in Rotherham, but then you end up in another situation with a test center that has no big roundabouts or major roundabouts to deal with, but then you've got terrible meeting traffic situations. Or perhaps you might end up in Sidcup, where you've got these country roads that's so narrow, not even enough to fit one truck, left alone two cars, and you get stuck. So you've got to bear in mind that the best way is to get yourself prepared for anything. I always say prepare for the worst. And this is always going to be the best way to deal with anything. Or even if you're not prepared for it, just take a few seconds and think. Right? And some other situation, people then decide to focus on the time. Okay, I'm going to try and look for tests within morning hours, say between 10 and 12. Or I'd look for tests between 11 and 2, for example, because this tends to be the most quiet times. But again, it's not always the best solution, because I've taken someone to test at 7 a.m. in the morning, which is the most quietest time, if I use that word, if it even exists. That's the most quiet time you can have a test, because I've done it a couple of times, but not all of them passed. And that's because sometimes you just don't know. We did one in December and it was at 7:30 in the morning. Now, Lena was expecting the road to be so quiet, you know, and that's why she picked the time. But we went for it, and the Lena was shocked at what she met, because it wasn't that quiet. But to be honest, it was actually quiet. But she was just expecting it to be a lot more quiet than that, and that became a problem. And as soon as she saw the amount of traffic at the time, she panicked. And this was the reason why she failed. She still couldn't do it. Now, if you ask me, that was a very good time. The situation was very good. It just wasn't what you're expecting. Now, don't forget, you don't make the test, you don't make the route, and you don't control the traffic. So you might think 8 a.m. is the best time for you, or 1 a.m., but what if things are different on that day? There becomes a problem as well. So, what I'm trying to say is do not run away from your problem. A better driver or a good driver can pass their test anywhere. Anywhere. And in the last video I posted, there was a driver who went to Canterbury and we passed with zero faults. And this was a driver that's never driven there before, never driven a car before, and the time was not an issue. It was 2 something in the afternoon, but yet we came with a pass. So let's watch this video. And in this video, it was a learner who's failed, I believe, 2 or 3 times now. And these tests were taken at 2 different test centers that I can remember. I'm not sure if we did the Heathrow Green one, but we've done Barking and we've done Colchester, which is the one we're looking at today first, and then we're going to look at the Barking one briefly after that. Now, she failed because of one same situation, and that's lane discipline. Lane discipline is very important. And this is what I'm trying to say. So if you're running away because you think Heathrow Green is bad, or Colchester is bad, or Barking is not good enough, that's not the problem. Because wherever you find yourself, if your lane discipline is not good, you're going to show it. There's nothing you can do about it, because it's as simple as just leaving one lane to another lane. So all it takes for you to do this mistake is just to have 2 lanes. That's all it takes. And I can't see any test route whereby all the lanes are going to be just single lanes. Eventually you get to a point where you've got dual carriageway, 2 lanes going the same direction. And at that point, you find yourself moving from one lane to another when you shouldn't be, or you get confused of what lane to remain on. So let's look at the video and point out or pick out the things that were wrong. And I hope that you will be picking one or two things from this driving test and avoid this on your test route. But remember, I keep saying this and I continue to emphasize this: work on your nerves. This is the first thing you need to remember, and your mental preparedness or your mental readiness is just as important as your driving ability, because that's why a lot of good drivers go and fail, because mentally they are not prepared. So prepare yourself and be ready. And this year, make it your year. Go and pass, get your license, and enjoy. So let's get to the video. At the roundabout ahead, the learner's lane position was bad at the roundabout. This is because she was in the middle of the lane instead of keeping well enough to the right hand side and give way to any vehicle that is trying to use the first exit or the second exit. Now, as we get to the roundabout, look behind the learner and you'd see the positioning of the van and other vehicles behind and compare it to our positioning. Now, this was the first alarm bell, and I'm assuming this would have been minor on the test. Now, also notice that as she entered the roundabout, she went into the right, but then immediately comes into the middle of the road, thereby blocking any car that would have wanted to exit at the second exit. So remember, position yourself well into your own side on the right, and then when you get to the exit, before you exit, this is when you start returning to the left. Now, as the learner approached this roundabout, you can see already that she's already slightly going over the center line. Now, here is her positioning just at the roundabout, waiting at the giveaway line before she entered the roundabout. Well positioned to the left. Now, as you can see, she's now in the middle of the road and then blocking the vehicle on the right hand side from passing. And then she comes back to the left to exit at the second exit. So you want to avoid situations like this. As you enter the roundabout, stay in your lane and change lane when it's the right time to change. So at this roundabout, the learner is supposed to take the second exit right, and then at the next roundabout, take the second exit right again. But when she came out of this roundabout, instead of keeping to the right hand side to prepare her for the next roundabout, she came into the left lane. Now, there was also a road marking on the floor to let you know that the left lane was for turning left only. But as you can see here, she went ahead using the left lane. And she did not just only use the left lane, but she also blocked the right lane. So again, she was sitting in the middle of the two lanes and blocking the right lane as well. And then there was a car on the right trying to turn right as well, and she was clearly blocking that car. Now, if she had just turned left at that roundabout instead of using that left lane to turn right, she wouldn't have had a serious fault, which means she wouldn't have been failing for that. But then, as she made that mistake, she came out of the roundabout, and yet again, she's driving in the wrong lane. So, using the right lane for a good amount of time. Now, bear in mind that if she'd realized this on time and moved out of that lane, that wouldn't have been a big deal. But she sat there for a while, and from, my experience, this is long enough for you to get a serious fault in this case, especially with those cars undertaking you on the left. That should have given you a sign. That should have woken you up and remind you to go back to the left lane. But yes, it was too late. But eventually she realized it and she came back to the left lane. But it was already too late. So 2 faults there within, say, 30 seconds. Not so good. And that was where things started to get even worse. Now, bear in mind that we have now entered a 70 miles per hour road, so national speed limit. And at this point, it's a dual carriageway, so it's going to be 70. Now, bear in mind, if it's a single carriageway, then the national speed limit that applies in that case is going to be 60. But with that being said, you can tell for yourself what the speed is at the moment. So that to me is not enough progress. 59 and below or under 60 and a 70 miles per hour road is not so good. But eventually she did make progress. But then again, it just went up and down. But we'll see the worst case scenario later on. Now ahead of us, the speed limit is changing to 30 because we're now entering a residential area, but the learner did not notice the sign and she just continues driving way, almost doubling the speed limit. And when she realizes it, right here, she brakes. And luckily, there were no other vehicles around that would have been affected by that decision or that braking. And now at this point, because of the previous incident, she is now driving below the speed limit. So obviously at this point, trying to be too cautious. And we're now doing 20, 22, well, below 25 miles per hour on a 30 miles per hour road. And again, bear this in mind. So from a very hot cake to a very cold pap. And then as she turns left on this road ahead, she uses the hatch markings to turn left. Now remember, don't be driving on the hatch markings unless it is really necessary. You should not be driving on them. And then on this road, she was taking a very long time to build up the speed and then not really making much progress. So again, driving below 25 miles per hour on a 30 miles per hour. And bear in mind, the road is quite open and safe to actually make good progress. And yet we are still driving below the speed limit, well enough below the speed limit. And if you observe at this point behind, we've got a buildup of traffic behind us, which is not good. So again, depending on how long this goes on or how much the examiner feels about it, it could be a serious fault. But at this point, this was not a serious because she only had 3 serious altogether. So I'm assuming this would have been a minor fault. So bear this in mind. 25 and below on a good road, that's 30 miles per hour. Don't sit on 22, 23, 24. At least 26, 27 would be decent enough. And if you can get past that safely, then why not? Drive like a driver, remember. So drivers pass, not learners. Now, did you notice since when we've actually entered national speed limit zone and how long it took us to get up to 50 miles per hour? And with the speed limit now being 70 miles per hour because it's now a dual carriageway, we're still driving below 60 miles per hour. So again, bear this in mind. Now, remember when you're passing cyclists or motorcyclists on an open road, because of the wind especially, remember to give them enough space. Especially on a road like this, there's a there's a national speed limit zone. Consider using the right lane if it's safe to do so because of the speed and the wind, because it's an open road. So keep this in mind. And again, we're back to roundabouts. And then Leonard drives in the middle of the road here again to exit at the second exit. And then at this roundabout, she could have used a left to get through this roundabout, but again, she positions to the right and then goes through the roundabout. Then later on, after the first exit, comes back to the left position for this roundabout. So as you can see, there's a very common errors with a roundabout and the positioning. So the most biggest problem is lane discipline and lane positioning. And no matter where you would find yourself as a learner, no matter what test center you find yourself and you have this problem, you would always show it. You can't hide it. And if this continues failing you, don't think it's not you, it's either the examiner or it's the test route or the test center. You're only deceiving yourself. So at this point, they have now returned to the test center, and of course, the test was a fail. So if we just go back to the few things that she was failed for, or the three things that she was failed for, now most of it were to do with her lane positioning. So two of them. The first one was the roundabout, where she had used the left lane, which is for turning left only, to turn right. And even if she didn't turn right at that position, she was still blocking the vehicles on the right lane because she was sitting in the middle of both lanes. So remember, lane positioning is very important. Use your lane, especially when the lane is big enough for your vehicle. Now, if the lane isn't big enough for your vehicle, then we can understand. But in most of these cases, the lanes are always big enough. And you notice that as she approaches the roundabout in two of the occasions, she started to move away from the left and started to create more space on the left and taking more space in the right. And this is where she ends up in the middle or over the center line at most of these junctions.